Imagine you are at a bus stop and someone asks you the time, so you glance at your watch and say, "It is 2:37. That is a perfectly normal thing to do in the modern world, right? But if you asked an ancient Celt, they might say, "It is just before the cattle come home," or "It is 3 songs until sunset," or "It is the time when the mist still clings to the hills," which, let us be honest, is poetic and beautiful, but also the sort of thing that might make you miss your actual bus. Because the Celtic mind did not live in time like we do. It flowed with it. It danced with it. It was not trapped in the obsessive tick-tock tyranny of a wristwatch. And that is exactly why we are here. Because linear thinking about time is like trying to eat soup with a fork. Technically, you can do it, but it is messy, exhausting, and you will never get the good bits. We, in the modern West, have inherited a straight-line view of time. You are born, you grow up, you get a mortgage, you slowly get more disappointed in your knees, and then, eventually, you die. That is the straight line. And we measure it with such ridiculous precision that we now have atomic clocks that can tell you the time to the billionth of a second, which is great if you are trying to synchronize a satellite, but completely useless if you are, say, trying to figure out if it is the right moment to kiss someone. In the Celtic world, time was not a one-way conveyor belt. It was more like a wheel or a spiral or a river that sometimes loops back on itself. Imagine Doctor Who, but with more sheep and fewer budget cuts. The Celts lived in an agrarian, nature-based society, which meant they saw time through the rhythm of seasons, the waxing and waning of the moon, the migration of birds, and the growth of crops. They did not think of Monday at 8 a.m. as a thing. In fact, Monday would be more like the day after the gathering of the clan, and 8 a.m. would be when the sun just touches the oak grove. Time was inseparable from nature, community, and meaning. In their worldview, everything had its moment, but that moment was not nailed to a calendar date. It arrived when the conditions were right. This is what anthropologists call event-based time, which sounds academic but really just means we do things when it makes sense, not when the clock says so. Now, before you start thinking, that sounds lazy, consider this. Our obsession with clock time is only a few hundred years old. The real villain here is the Industrial Revolution, when factories needed everyone to show up at exactly the same time so the owners could squeeze maximum productivity out of human bodies before lunch. That is when we stopped living by the sun and the seasons and started living by the shrill scream of the factory whistle, which, by the way, is a terrible way to wake up. The Celts would have found this idea absurd. You do not plant seeds because the clock says it is 9 a.m. on March 10th. You plant seeds when the soil is soft enough, the frost has gone, and the wind feels like it is carrying spring in its breath. And the funny thing is, science now agrees with the Celts on this point. Biologists talk about kairos timing, the right moment, which often matters more than chronological precision. Think about it. In relationships, business, creativity, and life decisions, the timing that matters is rarely Tuesday at 4:15. It is the intangible sense that now is the moment. The Celts understood this and built their festivals, rituals, and even their stories around cycles. The year was divided into great seasonal festivals like Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh, each marking a transition point in the great wheel of the year. These were not just holidays. They were reminders that life moves in patterns, that endings lead to beginnings, and that you are always somewhere on a loop, not on a straight line toward oblivion. One of the most beautiful Celtic ideas is that of eternal return. The same forces, the same energies, the same human dramas keep repeating, but not exactly the same each time. It is like rewatching your favorite TV series, but you notice new details on each viewing. And that is where linear thinking fails us. We treat time as if each moment is a disposable paper cup, used once and thrown away. But the Celts saw moments as recurring waves. You ride them again, you learn more each time, and you deepen your understanding with each cycle. In a way, it makes life less terrifying, because if you mess up today, you know the pattern will come around again. That is not procrastination. That is trust in the natural rhythm. Here is where it gets practical for us modern mortals. If you are locked into a linear mindset, you tend to rush, to panic about running out of time, to feel like every mistake is final. You think, I have to get this right now, or it is gone forever. That kind of thinking is responsible for everything from midlife crises to those horrible moments where you eat an entire tub of ice cream at 2 a.m. because you feel like life is slipping away. The Celtic approach says, slow down, look for the right moment. Trust that life is not a single shot but an ongoing dance. And in neuroscience terms, this is brilliant, because our brains actually work better when we are not under constant time pressure. Studies on creativity show that ideas often arrive in what psychologists call incubation periods, those times when you are not actively forcing the solution but letting it emerge. The Celts would nod wisely at this and say, yes, that is why you take a walk in the forest instead of staring at a sundial. Of course, the Celtic understanding of time also included a different relationship with the past and the future. We tend to think of the past as gone and the future as not yet here. But in Celtic myth and poetry, the past is alive, swirling in the present, and the future is already seated in today's actions. They told stories of heroes and ancestors not as history lessons, but as living presences that still shape the moment. In some tales, time is porous. Heroes step into the other world and return to find 100 years have passed, or they spend one night at a feast that lasts centuries. These were not just entertaining plots, they were metaphors for how time feels when you are deeply engaged in life. It expands, it contracts, it becomes something other than a straight march forward. Now here is where it gets even more fascinating. Modern physics, particularly in relativity theory, says that time is not a single universal clock. It is relative to motion and gravity. And in quantum mechanics, time can be even weirder, with particles existing in superpositions that defy neat chronological order. In a strange way, the Celtic sense of time as fluid and cyclical fits modern science better than our rigid tick-tock model. So, while we might think the Celts were just dreamy poets with nice hair and impressive facial tattoos, they might have been closer to the truth of the universe than our smartphone calendar will ever be. If you want to live with a Celtic sense of time, start by breaking up with the clock a little. Not fully, unless you enjoy missing flights, but enough to loosen the grip. Notice the natural rhythms in your own life, when your energy peaks, when your creativity flows, when your body wants to rest. Do not force everything into the same rigid schedule. Honor the cycles. That might mean planning your big creative projects to start when you feel the surge of inspiration, not when it is convenient on paper. It might mean resting deeply in winter and going full power in spring. It might mean being patient with yourself when you are in a fallow season, because you know that winter always gives way to spring. Another trick is to measure time in experiences, not just minutes. The Celts did not say, it was a good day because it was efficient. They said, it was a good day because we feasted, we told stories, we laughed until our ribs hurt, and we felt the wind change. In modern terms, that is about quality of life, not just productivity. Neuroscience backs this up too. People who focus on meaningful experiences report greater life satisfaction than those who focus on squeezing more tasks into their day. So here is the paradox. The Celtic understanding of time will not make you more productive in the modern corporate sense. It might even make you less obsessed with churning out output, but it will make you more alive, more attuned, and less anxious. And ironically, that often leads to better results anyway, because you are working with life's rhythms instead of thrashing against them. And that is the real punchline. Linear thinking about time is like looking at a Celtic knot and insisting it is just a straight piece of rope. You miss the beauty, the complexity, the way everything loops back on itself. The Celts lived in a time web, not a timeline, and if we could even borrow a bit of that world view, we might stop feeling like we are in a race we can never win and start feeling like we are part of a grand repeating song. So, the next time someone asks you the time, you could still say, it is 2:37. Or you could smile mysteriously and say, it is the hour when the wind smells like rain. Sure, they might think you are a bit weird, but maybe you will have given them a glimpse of a different way of living. One where the clock is not the boss. One where life moves in graceful circles, and every moment has its season. And maybe, just maybe, you will both stop rushing for a second and notice where you are in the great wheel. Because the Celts knew something we have forgotten. Time is not money, it is life, and life is too precious to be flattened into a straight line. If you enjoyed this little time travel adventure into Celtic thought, drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think we should bring back the Wheel of Time, or are you happy with your calendar alerts yelling at you? And while you are here, subscribe to XQ, Quick Funny Explanations, for more fast, funny, genius-level content delivered at the speed of laughter. Just do it before the cattle come home. Trust me, that is a very specific window.